Chapter 1421, You Never Know What's Going to Happen in Life. Although the sage is from the Three-Eyed Clan, he is not at all annoying. He looks like a happy old man who is engrossed in his studies. Fatty Sue rolled his eyes and grinned. Great, I'll invite you to our place to be our guest. Our boss is very hospitable, and he is very rich, so he can support you as you continue your studies of the world above ground. During his exchanges with the sage, Fatty Sue received some unfortunate news. The prehistoric civilization they thought was the Three-Eyed Clan had also experienced many gaps in its history. Today, their historical records are actually very short, and many events have even been passed down in the form of myths and legends. However, Fatty Sue was not at all stupid. This most learned old man from the Nash Kingdom was a living database. If we can take him back with us, we can get a lot of information about the underground community by piecing together the clues from him. Gawain glanced at Fatty Sue and said, When it comes to preserving culture, we in Britannia are doing a better job, aren't we? Fatty Sue said unconvincingly, You're shameless, saying that after taking what's ours. Gawain's tone trailed off, and he was unable to refute Fatty Sue's words. The three of them ran through several doors in the swaying building towards the entrance of the Holy Spirit Temple. The sage's eyes were now filled with anticipation for the future. What kind of magnificent sparks will be created when two different human civilizations come into contact? I can't wait. I've always wondered about the origin of the Three-Eyed Clan and whether there are any advanced intelligent beings in the world other than us. Now, this opportunity has finally arrived. He hugged the notebook in his arms, his excitement evident. Just as they rounded a corner in the long corridor, the sound of a bullet being fired suddenly rang in their ears. Bang! The crisp sound echoed through the white corridor. Accompanying the sound was a spray of blood as it splattered onto the ground, and the sage's eyes suddenly became a little vacant. His huge body kept running forward, but it suddenly slowed down and collapsed. Fatty Sue, who had been frowning and planning to argue with Sage, turned around when he heard the gunshot. The next moment, his face turned pale. It was because he saw the blood splattered on Sage's chest and his body fall heavily to the ground. Boom! The huge body fell to the ground, and Gawain was also momentarily stunned. She didn't expect someone to shoot her in the back. She turned her head sharply in the direction from which the bullet had come and saw a woman with short silver hair and cold eyes holding a silver pistol looking in their direction. Lan Malik. Gawain was relieved to see that the person who had arrived was one of her own companions, but she quickly turned her head to look at the sagging sage on the ground and frowned slightly. His white shirt was stained red, and Lan Malik's shot had been aimed to take his life, directly piercing his heart. Fatty Sue walked over to him in disbelief, and after coming back to his senses, quickly took out the medicine and injected it into him. Hey, old man, hang in there. Don't die, you still have to go with us to the world above the ground to study the cultural history of our human race together. The sage collapsed weakly to the ground, and he glanced at Fatty Sue, his eyes a little dazed. He didn't understand why he was going to die. Why did someone want to kill him? But he was already too old. His weak body and pierced heart left him with no strength to say another word. With his last ounce of strength, he handed the notebook in his hand to Fatty Sue, and then his eyes lost their expression. Until the moment of death, he never closed his eyes. In his eyes, Fatty Sue saw a strong sense of injustice. It was clear that very soon, he would be able to see a different world. Why was he just one step away from being able to do so, and yet he had to be killed here? He couldn't understand. Lan Malik walked step by step towards the Three-Eyed Clan, looking at the fatty who had stopped the bleeding of the Three-Eyed Clan. She frowned and also aimed her gun at Fatty Sue. Hey, what are you doing? Fatty Sue twisted his head around. For the first time, he did not show any fear in the face of the gun, but asked with grief and indignation, Why are you shooting? Why do you want to kill him? Lan Malik froze for a moment, then snorted and said, He's from the Three-Eyed Clan, do you need a reason to kill him? You little brat, I just saved your life, can't you even say thank you? Lan Malak was a little confused. She had hurried over as soon as she heard someone approaching, only to find a member of the Three-Eyed Clan chasing after her companion and another human. Without any hesitation, she shot and killed the Three-Eyed Clan member. But what was going on now? A human, glaring at her because she killed a member of the Three-Eyed Clan? What the hell? Fatty Sue roared in anger, but he's just an old man who reads books all day. He hasn't done anything to us, and he was even going to take us away from this damn place. Lan Malak was a little surprised. Since they arrived here, every member of the Three-Eyed Clan they had met had treated humans like domestic animals. But now she had actually seen someone empathize with the Three-Eyed Clan. To use your Huashu Kingdom's words, this is the Holy Mother. Lan Malak said sarcastically. No matter what he did to you, an alien is an alien. There is nothing wrong with killing a race that feeds on humans. On the contrary, you, despite being human, sympathize with a race that eats humans. How foolish. Fatty Sue was at a loss for words. He couldn't think of a way to refute Lan Malak either. Although this was a sad misunderstanding, was Lan Malak wrong? The sage might have been friendly towards them, but in a country where humans were domesticated as livestock, he had definitely eaten the indigenous humans before. Fatty Sue's heart was filled with mixed emotions, and he was in a state of great confusion. Gawain walked over and said to Lan Malak, he is one of Chaos's subordinates, and it seems. She glanced at Fatty Sue and then slowly gave her judgment, he is a useless waste. She had sensed this a long time ago. In the library, Fatty Sue's performance did not at all resemble that of someone with great power. Because a strong person also has a strong bearing and will. Fatty Sue gave the impression of being a harmless, easily excitable fat man. Lan Malak didn't waste any more time and took out a self-destruct collar and threw it at Fatty Sue. Coldly, he said to him, put it on yourself. 2 against 1, and he was up against the cowardly Fatty Sue, a guy with a 8,000-point supernatural ability index. It was inevitable that he would become a prisoner. But isn't the reason the world is wonderful precisely because there are miracles? Watching the sage, who until the end gazed into the sky with yearning eyes, eager to see the world of mortals, Fatty Sue's heart surged with uncontainable rage. I don't know anything about the Great Tao, whether it's about humans or the Three-Eyed Clan or any other nonsense. All I know is that when he was telling me that knowledge, he was sincere. His right hand pressed against the ground, and the next moment, a surging white air current spewed out from the hundreds of holes in his exoskeleton mecha, and the temperature of the entire corridor plummeted to -20 degrees in just 1 second. Chapter 1422, The Loser Eats Dust. Liu Karen's exoskeleton mecha was carefully crafted to enhance the combat power of everyone in Zhang Yi's team, especially Fatty Sue and Uncle Yu. Fatty Sue's talent potential was theoretically above Uncle Yu's. However, due to his personality, his supernatural ability index was only judged by Zhang Yi to be 8,000 points. However, if he could overcome his cowardice and give it his all, according to Zhang Yi and Yang Xinxin's analysis, he could even reach the level of 9,000 points. This is only a theoretical possibility. I don't think that guy will muster the courage to risk death and fight someone. Zhang Yi once concluded this way. Another thing is that Zhang Yi has been too protective of them. He had not expected a situation like this to arise, with Fatty Sue completely alone. Nor had he expected that an accident would allow the anger in Fatty Sue's heart to overcome his fear. Because of his fondness and sympathy for the sage, and the resentment he felt after being humiliated by Lan Malak, he exploded for the first time in his life. The liquid nitrogen sprayed from his armor quickly caused the surrounding air to cool. White ice crystals spread out in all directions along Fatty Sue's right palm, which was pressed against the ground. However, this had no effect on Lan Malak and Gawain at all. Their combat suits were designed to withstand extreme cold, and the temperature drop was the least of their worries. This guy, is he crazy? He actually wants to fight both of us at the same time. For the sake of the Three-Eyed Clan? Then he must be crazy. Lon Malak and Gawain didn't expect Fatty Sue to actually dare to attack. In the ultra-low temperature, the water in the air quickly froze into ice crystals. This gave Fatty Sue a weapon with which to fight. Blizzard. A serious look appeared on Fatty Sue's fat face, and a raging storm surged out from him, accompanied by the frost in the air around him, whistling towards Gawain and Lon Malak in front of him. Lon Malak snorted, and took a step forward to block in front of Gawain. Ching-a-ling. She drew her western sword from her waist, made a fencing motion, and then the entire person flashed towards Fatty Sue and stabbed him. Shining Knight, Lon Malak, a mutant with enhanced abilities, has a supernatural ability index of 9,500 points. Her sword was so fast that it became blurry, and her entire person left a towel of broken images in the air. But Fatty Sue raised his arms, and with a pff sound, the wrist armor on his wrists shot out, revealing 8 jet holes. The liquid nitrogen was sprayed directly in her direction, and a white fog of ice instantly enveloped the corridor in front of her. Lon Malak's body was instantly frozen. She shook herself free with all her might, and the ice and snow on her body shattered. Fatty Sue was unwilling to be a prisoner on a leash, so he looked down at the corpse of Sage and gritted his teeth before finally deciding to return him to dust. The liquid nitrogen sprayed onto his body quickly turned him into an ice sculpture. Fatty Sue blew on him, and a cold current swept over him. His huge body exploded with a bang, and turned into ice shards that filled the sky. This is ice burial, which is said to be the cleanest way to dispose of a corpse in the world. He knew he could never defeat the 2 knights of the Round Table. No, to be precise, even if he were to fight the battle-oriented Lon Malak alone, he knew he was no match for him right now. But at the very least, he now had the courage to run away. Compared to the past cowardly and weak him who only knew how to cower in the face of a strong enemy, he now had a bit of courage. Fatty Sue hugged the book that Sage handed him before he died. Although Sage never said anything, from the fact that he wanted to take it with him even in a critical situation, it must be an extremely important book. Holding the huge book, Fatty Sue quickly ran outside with the help of the exoskeleton mecha. Gawain frowned slightly as she looked at Sage's corpse, which had turned into ice chips. She actually had some good feelings for this old man. However, since he was now dead, there was nothing more she could say. That Fatty wasn't a very impressive character either, so let's just forget about him. Lon Malak said coldly, he had a very important-looking book in his hands. She pointed at her neck. Gawain sighed, and her body quickly turned into a blur, dissolving into a transparent liquid that seeped down her neck. Lon Malak immediately chased after the direction Fatty Sue had fled. 30 seconds later. Fatty Sue stood stiffly in place, unable to move, not because he didn't want to, but because there was a western sword resting on his neck. All it would take was a little more force from the other party to impale him through the joint of his mecha and into his throat. Even with the help of his mecha, the huge gap in strength still made his escape plan fall through. I thought you were quite something, but I never imagined you would be this weak. I really can't understand why chaos would bring you here. Lon Malak said unceremoniously. Fatty Sue looked at the woman in front of him, who was full of mockery and contempt, and deep down, a feeling of humiliation was born within him. He began to feel sad and indignant at his own weakness. It turned out that after losing the protection of Zhang Yi's wings, he would be so weak. At this time, the shaking of the Holy Spirit Temple had stopped. It could be seen that it did not originate from an earthquake. But a strong sense of unease still hung over everyone's hearts. Lon Malak put the collar on Fatty Sue and said coldly, "Let's go. I don't have time to waste here." More than half an hour had passed since they were banished. During this time, they should have quickly found their way to the main doors. However, due to the attraction of the fragments of the Source of God and the constraints of the people in the other teams, a lot of their time was wasted. This was precisely the intention of General Babu, who was guarding the main entrance. However, this method could not hypnosis them for long. With the help of a modern intelligence system, even if they were exiled to an area they did not know, they could slowly piece together the entire Holy Spirit Temple based on the previously observed shape of the Holy Spirit Temple and the spatial intelligence they had obtained along the way. Although they could not get the full picture, it was enough to support them moving closer to the main entrance. Finally, Zhang Yi and Liang Yu completed their reunion. Seeing that she was carrying Mordred as a prisoner, Zhang Yi didn't care too much, and just said, "Now we only need Fatty Sue. I hope that guy will be okay." Although Fatty Sue is a bit of a loser, he is everyone's happy-go-lucky, and Zhang Yi's usual Tao and gaming partner. In the past, Zhang Yi also intended to cultivate him, but if he left him alone, Zhang Yi was really afraid that he would be victimized. At this moment, Flower sniffed her nose and looked up at Zhang Yi and said, "I think I can smell the fat and oil on him." Chapter 1423, Return Things. Zhang Yi looked at the half-closed, high, grand doors in front of him and slowly narrowed his eyes. "I can feel it too." They walked towards the front, and after waiting until they had passed through the doors, they indeed saw Fatty Sue. They also saw the group of the Knights of the Round Table. At this time, almost all of the two groups had gathered here, but they didn't see anyone from the Garuda tribe. Both sides stared at each other, especially at the captives in each other's hands. In addition to Fatty Sue, who was controlled by the two women from the other side, Zhang Yi also saw Zhangda. As a captain-level mutant, Zhangda also followed Zhang Yi and the others over. "That's great, both sides have two prisoners from the other side in their hands. It seems that in some ways, they've all thought of the same thing." Lancelot looked at Zhang Yi with interest. "What a coincidence, I didn't think we'd meet again. And the Garuda guys have disappeared without a trace. Could it be another trap they've set?" Zhang Yi's eyes flashed, and he quickly said, "If he's that powerful, why wait until now?" He quickly figured out the truth of the matter, so he understood why Gao Changkong and the others were not here, but there was no need to tell Lancelot. From within shadow space, he released Mordred and Galahad. "Let's exchange prisoners." "I don't like to waste time," Zhang Yi said indifferently. Lancelot waved his hand with a cold smile. "That's just right, we have the same number of prisoners." Without any nonsense, both sides quickly injected the antidote into the captives, then untied the self-destruct collars around their necks and handed the captives over to the other side. Fatty Sue looked at Zhang Yi with a face full of guilt and embarrassment, but Zhang Yi didn't blame him. Fatty Sue was only able to survive because the Knights of the Round Table had reservations about killing him. After the exchange of hostages was complete, Lancelot said to Zhang Yi, "Don't you think the current situation is a bit too coincidental?" Zhang Yi said, "I was thinking the same thing." "Tell me what you think." "There are no such things as coincidences in this world. There is only necessity and deliberate human action. If it were a coincidence that the people from the two teams would come into contact, that would be fine. But the fact that they frequently came into contact, fought, and then met together in this place was no longer a coincidence. This, coupled with the fact that Gao Changkong and the others were not here, strengthened Zhang Yi's inner thoughts. He did not speak first, but instead planned to ask Lancelot for his opinion. Lancelot was silent for a moment, and then said, "When we entered the palace, we encountered the doorkeeper, who has space ability or rules category ability. It seems random, but in fact he was able to control the operation of this space and then make us come into contact. Then, he used the divine source to force us to fight. I don't know why, but the people from the Garuda tribe are not here. But if they were here, they would have been in the same situation as us." He looked at Zhang Yi and smiled slightly. "He is making us fight each other to consume our strength." He spread his arms and said with ease, "This is good news, isn't it? It means that in the face of us, they are not strong enough to crush us." Zhang Yi nodded, "I think so too. But there is one thing that is worse." Zhang Yi opened the topographical map of the Holy Spirit Temple drawn by his own intelligence system and shook his head helplessly. "If he can control the space here and deliberately cause us to come into contact with each other, then the map we currently have is also fake. So how are we going to get out of here? The Holy Spirit Temple is too big and is constructed using barrier stones, so they cannot violently destroy the walls and leave. And if the other party can still freely manipulate the space here, they are like mice being toyed with in a maze, and may never be able to leave here and find a way to the upper floors of the Holy Spirit Temple. Fatty Sue stood behind Zhang Yi, glanced at Gawain quietly, and his face showed an expression of wanting to say something but holding back. Zhang Yi did not notice Fatty Sue's expression and was still communicating with Lancelot. Lancelot said, "The exit must exist, and we can at least remember the rooms we passed through. In that case, let's split up and explore. As long as we don't fight with each other, we can save a lot of trouble." Zhang Yi didn't have a better idea at this time. Before he figured out Babu's abilities, he could only find a way out in the most stupid way. Okay, that's it. Zhang Yi was planning to leave here and find the exit. At this time, Fatty Sue tugged at his clothes. "Leon duh." Zhang Yi looked at Fatty Sue in surprise, only to see that Fatty Sue looked like he wanted to say something, his face full of anxiety, and his eyes constantly looking at the members of the Knights of the Round Table. Zhang Yi followed his gaze and saw that they were two female knights, and behind them they were carrying an ancient book as tall as a person. "What's wrong?" Fatty Sue pointed at the book on Lon Malik's back and said, "That book is mine. It's very important, I can't let them take it." "Book?" The book was so big that although Zhang Yi had seen it, he hadn't paid much attention to it at first. In the shortest amount of time, Fatty Sue explained what had happened to him. In short, it's the notes of an old scholar who spent his whole life working on it. It's very likely to contain the information about the ancient civilization you want. Upon hearing this, Zhang Yi's gaze suddenly became serious. The reason why he chose to come to the snowy plateau in the first place was because of these ancient documents. His goal was to find out what the Hades gatekeeper on Star Island and the snake people under the Qinling Mountains really were. This would allow him to face any future threats that might come. The ancient epic of King Geezer was able to touch his heart, not to mention the documents of the Nash Kingdom, which had an even more ancient civilization. Wait! Zhang Yi stopped the Knights of the Round Table, who were about to leave. Lancelot and the others turned back and frowned at Zhang Yi. "What is it? Is there anything else?" Zhang Yi pointed his finger at Lon Malik. "It seems she has taken something from my friend. I need her to return it." Upon hearing Zhang Yi's words, Lon Malik's hand immediately gripped the western sword at her waist, while she guarded the book sideways. They were not stupid and understood the importance of the book as well. They don't have any mutants with space abilities, so they can't take away the entire library of the King Nash's chamber. They must find the most precious documents and take them back. These notes, which the sage spent his entire life working on, are more precious to them than the source of God and are priceless treasures. Chapter 1424, The Advantage is with me X2. Argoquin spoke calmly at this time and said to Zhang Yi, "We got this book from the Three-Eyed Clan, and I don't know when it became his property." Fatty Sue pointed excitedly at Gawain and said, "You killed the sage, and the sage gave it to me when he was dying." Gawain did not deny this, but did not say anything more. They were not going to hand over the object. Lancelot glanced at Fatty Sue and then said to Zhang Yi, "Anything without an owner belongs to whoever gets it. I don't think you want to argue with us over a book at a time like this, do you?" Zhang Yi also glanced at Fatty Sue. He was a little surprised, because he hadn't seen Fatty Sue get so worked up over an object in a long time. The notebook was the product of the sage's life's work and was extremely valuable. Zhang Yi looked at Lancelot and said, "You took it from my people, so you have to give it back." Anyone who knew Zhang Yi knew that he would never start trouble, but he was also not afraid of it. So when he said this, he was already prepared to go to war with the Knights of the Round Table. Lancelot frowned and stared at Zhang Yi with cold eyes. "At a time like this, are you sure you want to go to war with me?" They were now in the territory of the Three-Eyed Clan, and they could face an attack from the powerful at any time. If there was another internal conflict, it would definitely not be the most sensible choice. However, Lancelot did not understand Zhang Yi. Zhang Yi smiled, a carefree smile. At a time like this? What time is it? I'm really sorry, if you don't want to go to war with me, then just give it back. My goal here is to get everything I want, so it doesn't matter to me whether my opponent is human or three-eyed clan. I will eliminate anyone who gets in my way. He didn't come here for the righteousness of any human race. Because that no longer had any meaning. What is certain is that the three-eyed clan is not as powerful as the White Dragon clan. Even if this clan emerges from the underground, their backward civilization will not pose a subversive threat to human society. All carbon-based lifeforms are equal in the face of the Reaper of Love. Everyone on the side of the Knights of the Round Table also became solemn and indifferent. However, there was no fear on their faces. Because the gap in strength was obvious. On Zhang Yi's side, Liang Yu was the only mutant who appeared to be relatively powerful on the surface. Uncle Yu and Fatty Su could reach a level of 9000 plus with the help of the mecha, but the strength they displayed could only be considered mid to low level. However, the Knights of the Round were all elites. Zhang Yi smiled without saying a word, reaching up to stroke the flowers above his shoulders. He never fought a battle he wasn't confident in winning, and if he wasn't absolutely confident in his strength, he wouldn't be so arrogant. The presence of the two epsilons meant that they had an absolute advantage in this battle. The Knights of the Round Table were not aware of this. Lancelot stared at Zhang Yi, the corner of his mouth curling slightly, revealing his wolf-like white teeth. It seems that you are determined to go to war with us. Zhang Yi said coldly, I have said that no one can bully my people. And no one can take away what I want. Lancelot sneered inwardly. His ability index was only 18,000 points, which was comparable to Zhang Yi's. However, Zhang Yi did not know that with the assistance of the Green Knight, Bowser, and the Pure Knight, Gawain, his ability index could immediately soar above 20,000 points. His supernatural abilities, Sword and Shield, the actual sword was actually the sword in the tree, Bowser, and Purified Water, Gawain, which could heal all injuries. Between mutants, when abilities can complement each other, they can burst out with exponential power. Even a Delta-level mutant can provide huge help to Epsilon. It's just like Yang Xinxin's mind and her Angel of Desire, which have provided Zhang Yi with help that is no less than Epsilon-level mutant help many times. Both of them are convinced in their hearts that once war breaks out, they will definitely achieve final victory. And no one wants to give up the important information left behind by the sage. So this battle is simply unavoidable. In fact, as long as Zhang Yi wants to fight, Lancelot has no way to refuse. He can take everyone into shadow space and then hunt down the entire Knights of the Round Table with his sniper rifle. Even if Lancelot is not afraid, all of his subordinates will definitely be killed. Lancelot stepped forward and said to Zhang Yi with a smile, our goal is not to kill each other. After all, at a time like this, a life and death struggle will benefit no one. So I propose that the two of us have a gentleman's duel. We'll just touch each other. The loser is not eligible to receive the Three-Eyed Clan's notes. What do you say? Just touch each other? That's not going to be easy, but Zhang Yi looked at the flower on his shoulder and agreed to Lancelot's proposal. I have the advantage. Both thought the same thing. They chose a huge conference room as the venue for their duel, where the two Epsilon-class mutants could give full reign to their powers. The others were told to stay outside and not disturb the duel in any way. But what actually happened? Lancelot had already quietly brought along Bowser and Gawain. As for Zhang Yi, needless to say, everyone was inside his dimensional space, and his number one horse, Flora, had also started to sharpen her claws on Zhang Yi's armor. A gentleman's duel? On the surface, it was. Zhang Yi and Lancelot entered the palace through the front and back doors. Immediately, the two of them reached a tacit understanding and locked the doors behind them. The two were separated by several hundred meters, a distance that was not far for them and could be reached in an instant. So, after the lock on the door had settled, with a click sound, without any signs, Flora suddenly jumped off Zhang Yi's shoulder, rose up into the wind, and transformed into a giant beast, charging straight at Lancelot. Zhang Yi turned around, holding 2 white eagles in his hands. The dark void energy wrapped around the holy silver bullets, which spurted out towards Lancelot like a sudden rain. Zhang Yi's sudden attack did not catch Lancelot off guard, and he was also ready for battle. The guardian shield in his left hand immediately appeared, and on the arm of his right hand, a vine snaked down and quickly turned into a huge green sword with a strange shape. Boom! Facing Flora, which had suddenly pounced in front of him, Lancelot's sword in the tree exploded into a forest of blades, directly blocking in front of Flora. Roar! Flora roared, its huge claws flashing with a cold light as it tore down directly. And Zhang Yi's rain of void bullets also ripped these trees apart like confetti. But after just a moment, these trees grew back with even more vigor, spreading like a disease to every corner of the room. Chapter 1425, Trinity. The vitality of plants has an upper limit that humans cannot reach. They bask in the sunlight, suck in the nutrients of the earth, and thrive. As long as there are enough nutrients, trees can grow sky high. The same is true of the Green Knight Bowser's abilities. He can take root in mutants and absorb their nutrients, thus making himself stronger. Therefore, the upper limit of Bowser's abilities depends on the host he possesses. And when he became the sword in Lancelot's hands, the tree he transformed into became even more massive and tough. Zhang Yi's eyes were cold as he continued to pull the trigger, and the black rain of bullets enveloped the entire room, while another area was completely shrouded in giant trees. The black rain of bullets continued to destroy this forest, while the forest continued to be destroyed and then regenerate. The two sides fought furiously for control of the room, creating a terrifying balance in the middle. Flora flapped its wings in the air, opened its mouth wide at the center of the tree cluster, and fired a high-energy particle beam straight at it. Through! 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 Huge branches crisscrossed and blocked its path. The tree became increasingly tough, with each fiber comparable to the toughest steel wire. Flora's breath destroyed a large area of the forest in one go, leaving behind extremely terrifying scars. But despite its seemingly immense power, it was unable to break through the defense of the sword in the tree at all. Soon, new buds sprouted again on the trees that had originally been broken, attacking Zhang Yi and Flora. Something's not right. The intelligence didn't say that this guy is a plant attribute mutant. Zhang Yi frowned, suddenly feeling that the situation had gone beyond his expectations. And hidden among the trees, Lancelot also had a grave look in his eyes as he gritted his teeth and said, "This guy actually has an Epsilon-level pet. Damn it, didn't the intelligence say that it only had the strength of a top-level Delta? But if that's all he's got, I can handle it." With the help of Bowser and Gawain, his strength has been greatly enhanced. Even if he faces 2 opponents at the same time, he'll still be fighting 3 against 2 and won't be at a huge disadvantage. Zhang Yi's hands continued to release void bullets as he pondered a countermeasure. Plant-type abilities have very strong defenses and are also very regenerative. It seems that as long as we find Lancelot's true body, we'll be able to defeat him quickly. However, my intelligence must have been wrong. Never mind, Deng Shintong has already done his best. I'll have to rely on myself next. We need to figure out what his abilities really are and what the hell this damn bush is. At this point, Zhang Yi and Flower were equivalent to fighting 2 Epsilons at the same time, so they became increasingly cautious. Zhang Yi directly opened dimensional space and took out a dozen napalm bombs from the arsenal, which he threw into the bush. In a limited space, this weapon can reach Gaon of thousands of degrees Celsius, and even melt steel. Facing trees, flames are absolutely an excellent weapon. Everything under heaven. Zhang Yi opened the dimensional gate in front of himself to prevent the energy released by the napalm burning in a limited space from harming his partner, Flora. He then detonated the napalm on the spot. In an instant, the entire room immediately turned into a sea of flames, engulfing everything the eye could see. However, this situation did not last long. In an instant, Zhang Yi watched as a huge water ball rose up in the middle of the room, engulfing all the flames. Shining Knight, Gawain, ability code Purified Water. She is a pure support type mutant. Pure water can heal injuries and, of course, it can also engulf flames. Another thing is that water and wood are complementary, and her ability complements Bowser's sword in the tree. With her, the power of the sword in the tree will become even more powerful. Therefore, the three of them, Lancelot, her, and Bowser, form a kind of trinity. When the three of them combine forces, they can unleash a power comparable to the Black Chariot level. Trees, water. This definitely cannot be the power of Lancelot alone. Zhang Yi had seen Lancelot in action before. He is a mutant who can release black flame. It's plausible that he has two supernatural abilities, but three, and with such a large difference in their natures, that's absolutely impossible. Inside the huge water ball, vines wrapped around Lancelot's body. Zhang Yi sneered, "Is this what you call a gentleman's duel? So you brought someone with you." Lancelot revealed his white teeth and sneered, "Don't point fingers, you've got helpers too. Neither of them is a good person who keeps their promises. They fight just to win, and even kill each other. What integrity and morality is there to speak of?" Zhang Yi's gaze became much more solemn. The combination of water and wood made the idea of attacking with fire no longer feasible. He himself is not a mutant who specializes in attacking, but is better at attrition and entanglement. However, the mutant with the attribute of wood is obviously also a master in this area and is not afraid of a long consumption war with him. What's more, even if Zhang Yi manages to break through the defense of the sword in the tree, there is still Lancelot behind it, who specializes in offense. Now, Zhang Yi really doesn't have an advantage in melee combat, ranged combat, explosions, or consumption. Boom! Lancelot doesn't give Zhang Yi time to think. In an instant, the crazily growing trees extend thousands of sharp vines and stab at Zhang Yi. Zhang Yi subconsciously retreated, and his body suddenly touched the wall behind him. This is a bit bad. Barrier stones have a restraining effect on my abilities. Even if I want to engage in a dogfight with him, the area where I can use Space Shuffle is limited to this room. I've been outmaneuvered. Zhang Yi had to admit that Lancelot was indeed a tough opponent, and he was caught off guard. However, just like that, he could not win against him. Zhang Yi's hands, and the white eagle was absorbed by Zhang Yi into dimensional space. He then drew his holy judgment sword. At medium and short distances, firearms are of limited use, and his sword is much more effective. Facing the thicket that quickly filled the entire room, a flash of light appeared in the right eye of Zhang Yi, and the space in front of him instantly warped. Divine Destruction. The strongest means of attack within short to medium distances, warping space, Divine Destruction. Boom! 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 The huge thicket shattered before it even reached 30 meters away from Zhang Yi, turning into a sky full of green powder. Most of the thicket in the room was completely eradicated by this move. It was only then that Zhang Yi could see Lancelot through the thicket. 7 or 8 slender vines extended from the sword in the tree on his right arm and pierced deep into his arm. And around his neck, a transparent substance could be seen wrapped around his body. Attachment mutant, is that right?